Good afternoon. Thank you all for coming here today. My name is Gavin Manu. I'm the publisher of the Southampton Press, as well as the East Hampton Press and the Sag Harbor Express. We're excited to be here in Hampton Bays for our press sessions event on the future of Hampton Bays and its downtown. I know there's a lot to talk about. This is our first event in Hampton Bays, so we'd like to thank One North Steakhouse, Chris, and his entire team for hosting us here today. I'd like to just quickly acknowledge a few members of our team who have joined us. Ellen Diogardi is our Director of Events at the front door. Thank you, Ellen. A few members of our advertising department are here today, all of whom either live in Hampton Bays or are from here originally. They are Winnie Decker-Channing, Keith Schultz, and Michelle Baer. Thank you all for joining us. Covering today's event, our photo editor, Dana Shaw, and our reporter, Kitty Merrill, are here today, as well as our managing editor, Bill Sutton, and our executive editor, Joe Shaw, who will be moderating the discussion. Thank you both. This is actually our 11th session that we've done in the various towns since September, and we're trying to wade through a lot of really important issues. So we thank you all for coming. We couldn't do these events without the support of some of our sponsors who are really important to us. Rocco Carrero Wealth Advisors are here with us today. Rocco, thank you so much for joining us. The law firm of Toomey, Latham, Shea, Kelly, Dubin, and Corderaro. Thank you all very much. Catherine and Brian are with us today. Thank you. I'd also like to thank our session partners, the Adam Miller Group. Thank you, Adam and his team. You're not Adam. Also, Advantage Title is a big supporter of ours, and Chris Nuzzi is here today. Thank you very much, Chris. Farrell Fritz, attorneys at law, David Gilmartin and Chris Kent are with us today. Thank you. Also, one of our newest sponsors, Bidewee. Melissa Morgan Nelson is a longtime volunteer who's with us today. Thank you very much to Bidewee. And also our session partners, Burke and Sullivan, attorneys at law, Daniel Gale Sotheby's International Realty, and the Hackett Group at Merrill Lynch. Thank you. Lastly, a big thank you to CTV and the town of Southampton. They film these sessions for us. They provide our technical support. It gets the word out to so many people who couldn't join us. So thank you to the crew at CTV. With that, we'd like to move on to the discussion today, and I will turn things over to the executive editor of the Express News Group, Joseph Shaw. Joe?
Thank you, Gavin. As Gavin said, this is our first event, our first press sessions event in the greatest community of the East End, Hampton Bays. I can say that because I'm a proud resident and I talk it up all the time. So when we began talking about expanding the Express session events that the Sag Harbor Express had been doing into press sessions as well, once we merged this past summer, we immediately began talking about doing an event in Hampton Bays first and foremost. We felt that it was long overdue, and I am very pleased personally to see such a wonderful turnout for the first event, and it demonstrates that we were right in thinking that bringing this event to Hampton Bay was the right thing to do. So thank you to everybody for coming today. It means a lot to us. Appreciate it. So our conversation today is going to be about the future of Hampton Bays and its downtown. We have a panel here to bring some different perspectives and different points of view. If you haven't seen video or been to one of these events before, these are meant to be conversations. This is not going to be lectures, and we're not going to spend a lot. We want to engage with panel members, with the audience. We want it to be a conversation. So what I'm going to ask is I'm going to introduce each of the panel members here in a moment. We've given them each one question in advance so they know what they're going to be asked, so they can introduce themselves and answer that first question. After that, I become a traffic cop. My job is just to direct traffic. You guys ask the questions. Please catch my attention, or Bill Sutton, our managing editor, will be wandering with the microphone as well. If you have a question or a comment, I'd ask you to keep it as brief as possible. That's true for the panel as well. And we'll get as much as we can. But please feel free, and I've told the panelists as well, catch somebody's attention if you've got something to add to the conversation. We really do want everybody to participate. Okay, and we will try and end it as close as possible to 2 o'clock because I know everybody's got a busy schedule. And so with that, we'll get started, and we'll start to my immediate left with Southampton Town Supervisor Jay Schneiderman. Jay, since its opening in 2017, do you believe that Good Ground Park has been a major contributor to reviving the business district of Hampton Bays, and why or why not?
All right, well, first, thank
If
you.
you can lean in, use the mic as much as you can, please.
Thank you
Everybody
to the
goes
press for hosting. Thank you all for coming. I've been to a number of these press sessions. They're wonderful forums. First of all, how many of you have ever been to Good Ground Park? Most people have been there. Okay, so you're familiar with it. It's a 38-acre park, has a beautiful amphitheater in the heart of it. Seats, I don't know, probably 700 to 1,000 people. It's a beautiful facility. The idea of Good Ground Park predated my administration, probably with several administrations. I hear the idea goes back probably around 20 years when people started talking about it, when there maybe had been a subdivision intended for that land. The town acquired that land, and plans were put in place, grants were received. It was not insignificant amount of money to build out that park. My administration sort of oversaw the construction of Good Ground Park, and with the amphitheater, with the restrooms that are there, the 2 playgrounds that are there, the trail that recently went in. I think it's, first of all, I think it's already a success. We've been doing concerts there every summer. We do about 10 concerts a summer. The average attendance is 500 people coming. I see that they're shopping at, stopping at local restaurants. Maybe they'll pick up a slice of pizza at Simone's Place or Francesca's. They'll eat it there afterwards. They maybe stop for a drink somewhere. So I think anecdotally, it is adding business to downtown. Definitely. Maybe not all the stores are benefiting with Good Ground Park, but particularly the food service establishments are. I think there'll be more and more use as it gets discovered. People love it. They go there. People go to walk their dogs or bring their kids to those playgrounds. It's bringing people into downtown. For a downtown to survive, you need foot traffic. It is a generator of foot traffic. Obviously, special events generate more, but the daily use of the park as well. But in the future, as we connect downtown to the park, because right now it's only a block away, but it's a little hard to get to. But as we, create a better interface, a better interchange between downtown and the park, I think you'll see a lot more foot traffic, and it'll help the park. It'll also help downtown. So those days, I think, are ahead. I'm sure that's going to be part of the conversation. But I think this is really just the beginning of that park and how it's benefiting downtown.
All right, thank you, Jay. Next to Jay is Rick Martell. He is the newest member of the Southampton Town Board and a good person to have on the panel because he also happens to be a Main Street business owner, Skidmore's Sports and Styles on Main Street. Rick, in a story in the press last year, your colleague on the town board, Julie Lofstad, also a Hampton Bays resident, said that one concern among Hamlet residents and merchants is that Hampton Bays has become a drive-through town rather than a walkable one. Do you agree? And as a business owner and as a councilman, how can that be best addressed, if that's true?
Okay, let me start off by thanking Joe Shaw for actually saying that Hampton Bays is the most fantastic hamlet, not only in the town of Southampton, but in Suffolk County. I got to say, from my years of participating in youth sports and taking care of the youth of the community, that there is not a more sympathetic and helpful community than we have here. That said, days on Main Street, I've been going through the door at Skidmore since 1974. I've walked these streets, and I totally understand what Julie is talking about. Councilman Lofstad recognizes the fact that physically we are a very long, very spread out Main Street. If you go to Carvel, or you go to Shinnecock Hardware, or you go to Buckley's, these are destinations. You take your car, you go to one place, you probably go home. Maybe you stop at a second. You never really walk Main Street. And it's for a lot of reasons. Physically, there's gaps in our Main Street. There's a little bit of a lack of variety in retail and restaurants. We do not have any restaurants, a couple tables outside, little sidewalk dining. We don't have any alleyways, cute little walkways, things that we see in Sag Harbor and Southampton that kind of draw you as you walk along Main Street to different ideas. My wife and I, we go to Patchogue, we go to the theater, we're going to stop at a couple stores, we have a bite to eat, we roam around a little bit. We don't have that essence here in Hampton Bays. And with the pending loss of the movie theater, I think it's even going to be worse for our younger people. Hopefully down the road, we can fill in some of the businesses, some of the physical aspects in town. We do maybe, in my lifetime, get a performing arts theater, and it all connects to downtown. So, it's all things that we have to think about. But I totally agree that there are some lapses and concerns.
Okay. Thank you, Rick. Next to Rick is Maria Holtz. She is the president of the Hampton Bays Civic Association. Maria, among Civic Association members, what do you think the vision is for the future of Main Street and the downtown? Meaning, what do you think most members of your organization want to see in 10 years, 20 years?
Well, first of all, let me just thank you for including the Civic in this conversation.
Yeah, the mic.
Sorry.
Just so everybody
For
can hear.
including the Civic in this conversation. And the Civic did a charrette and literally asked our constituents and our members what they wanted to see in downtown. And as Rick said, one of the first things is a walkable downtown. We can't have a sidewalk that runs for 1.5 miles or 2 miles. They want it broken up. They want little alleyways or streets that they can go into. They want to tear down the fences between stores and buildings so that you can walk across even if you're on the back and not just the front. They want buildings moved to the front of Main Street, not to have a parking lot in the front and then go into a store. They would like to see bioswales running along Main Street. It would take care of the drainage. It would give us a nice look in plants. And that was very high priority for Civic members. They want bike paths, so that they want bike paths and they want bike rentals and racks so that they can pick up a bike and move from one side of town to the other. With the advent of CPI, that's going to be an even longer Main Street. So those are all things that they want. They wanted an inn or a bed and breakfast on Main Street so that it would attract people. They're looking at distinctive roof lines. They don't want tall buildings. They want to keep the feeling of a hamlet and not have too much overdevelopment or overpopulation. And those are the basic interests of the Civic. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Maria. Janice Shearer is the Planning and Development Administrator for Southampton Town. Janice, can you explain the overall goal of the proposed downtown overlay district and how it will bring about changes that will truly benefit both residents and business owners?
Sure. Thank you, Joe, and thank you, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. The purpose of the pattern book, I think, is summed up when you say that we know we have a lot of area between Main Street and the park that, in our terms, we would call that infill development. And so what the authentic and appropriate kind of development that will go there is what this whole thing is all about. So first and foremost, this whole process was set up to look at who do you want to show up as Hampton Bays. You're presenting yourself, you have the opportunity to participate and say, what do we want to see our future as? And that visioning process was probably the most important part, because it's not just saying what you don't want, it's saying what you do want. So we did this exercise with a company called Historical Concepts, where they did a precedent tour, and they went around all similar types of coastal communities on Long Island to look at the styles, and they literally measured the sidewalks, they measured the facades, the distances, the setup, and they gave us a report, and it was called a precedent tour or report, the data gathering. Then we went out to the community and said, okay, well, what do you like and don't like? What do you want to, vote? Tell us the types of buildings you like, the things that make you feel proud, the type of place you would like to visit. What kind of, experience do you want to have, and how do you want to present yourself as authentically Hampton Bays? We know where we've been, you know who you are in the past, And then you need to see, what do you want to show up as your best version of Hampton Bays for the future? And that is why we did this, because it's the community that makes the place, not somebody in an office somewhere. It is you, it is everyone to say, this is what we want to see ourselves as, and influence that process. And then we put together that pattern book, and to say, these are the guidelines, these are the kinds of designs people want to say. And then we took that and codified a form-based code. So when a developer comes in, it's not the same as saying, hey, we're going to put up this shopping center over here, give me my permits. It's like, well, do you have these roof lines? Did you include solar? Do you have these trees? Do you have your bioswales? Where are the sidewalks? All those things are put forward in that form-based code so that there's no question, there's no fight. Everybody has an expectation, and this is what it is. And that makes investment and certainty in a process where we have to remember that people are putting money and risk into this. And so they have to understand what's being expected of them. And then we went through this entire secret process where we analyzed what kind of infrastructure will this take, what kind of, impacts will this have, and we looked at all of that. And that's what this whole process is, to provide A, certainty, B, beautification, and C, this revitalization and this sense of you are building this, and we will have this come in through a 10-year, horizon, but you can understand what to expect to have happen and be, engaged with it. And I think that's why it's important, because that certainty is there, and that you've had the chance to participate and, make it come to fruition as you see it. And that's why I'm, very much, there's always room for changing it and amending things and working with people's concerns. But on the whole, this is all to prescribe the type of infill development and the future development of Main Street and Good Ground Road, and how this all interconnects to create a very special place. Thank you.
Thanks, Jan. So we'll come back and we'll talk about some of that in more detail for sure. Ray D'Angelo is the chair of the Hampton Bays Citizens Advisory Committee. Ray, what are the biggest concerns among the Hampton Bays CAC and the Hamlet's residents about this proposed downtown overlay district and the changes it could bring in zoning?
Well, first of all, I want to thank you, Joe, for inviting me and the Southampton Press. First of all, I want to correct something. Our committee was not reappointed this year, so I'm not currently the chairman. 2019 I was.
I'm told you still are, Ray. So
No, well...
let's take it as written.
Well, I mean, I don't agree with that, but that's for a discussion for another time. First of all, I like to bring some reality into this conversation. I think our committee does support revitalization, but with some caveats, some very important caveats. The first of all, it should lift all boats in the Hampton Bays, not just the property owners, the business owners, and not just the developer. A point of fact is most of the property north of the highway, north of Montauk Highway, is owned by one owner. And this is like to me, sometimes when I read this stuff, it's like a stealth PDD. And all you have to do, and the reason why I'm cautious about this, is that you have to look up 24, what's going on in Riverhead. Riverhead had the development of 58. They've gone down this road of urbanization, and now they're having tremendous problems in their school district with funding. They pay even a higher tax rate than Hampton Bays. They just announced that they need a $100 million bond issue to increase capacity. They have a record number of enrollments. And quite frankly, we're a working and middle class area. We have a lot of seniors. We have to be careful. We can't overload these people. And the reality also is that the plan is morphed from a commercial development, a commercial retail, which most people want shops and everything, to a residential development, a large residential development. And residential development means bring services, town services, school services. And I'm concerned that, we're going to be overloaded with this. I've concentrated on reviewing the traffic and parking. And I'm reading the plan here, and it's like science fiction. It doesn't really address these needs. And these people probably going to have a lot of cars. So there's a lot of problems. I do support revitalization, but we have to go, I think we have to be very careful. And another point is, we just had this at the Water District hearing the other night. We have a Superfund site right in the middle of this thing. And I've been in contact with the DEC. They're going to come up with a proposed remediation plan. And we have to look at that because the plume, you know, if this soil, and primarily it's on the south side of Montauk Highway, but if it spreads out and goes under these other buildings on the south side, the DEC is not going to allow excavation. I mean, and probably the only real remedial way to get rid of this stuff is to excavate it, and they take it and they incinerate it to get the chemical out of it. So we have some really major concerns. And the other thing that came out of that Water District hearing was that our water bills to do the infrastructure work that we need are going to go up about 21 or 22% next year, well, when they do it, when it gets approved next year. So, you know, again, we're a working middle-class area, and I'm concerned particularly about the seniors. You know, they're on fixed income, they retired out here, our taxes were low, and a lot of them are having trouble. So I like to, you know, be that voice. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Ray. And last but certainly not least, Simone Scotto, who is the owner of Scotto's Pork Store right in the heart of Hampton Bays on Main Street. Simone, speaking as a Main Street business owner, what are the ways that Town Hall can truly make a difference in your success?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me here. Obviously, foot traffic is a problem. We don't have any foot traffic in Hampton Bays whatsoever. The only time we have foot traffic is when there's an event in the park, which is 13 weekends out of the year on a Thursday night, is when we generate some foot traffic, which is great. Obviously, we need to figure that out as a community. We have a bunch of civic groups here in town that are great, but it seems like everybody has their own agenda on what they want to see with Hampton Bays, the future of Hampton Bays. I believe that we need to all come together as a community and have a plan and go forward. I think each civic group should pick a few things that they want, come together at a meeting, each civic group, and present it to the town. The town is going to do what we want. The power is in numbers. If we don't get together and do this, everybody's always going to have an opinion what they want to see in Hampton Bays, and this plan is never going to go forward.
Okay, thanks, Simone. So I want to open it up to audience questions. Before I do, let me just kick it off with a question. And Janice, actually, I want to start with you if you don't mind. It's a two-part question that sort of comes from some of the comments that we've already heard. I'm intrigued by the comparisons to Patchogue and Riverhead, who have tackled some similar kinds of revitalization efforts. I also would point to West Hampton Beach, who just did a major Main Street project as well. There's a big difference between all of those in Hampton Bays. Those are all villages, and this is an unincorporated part of the town. Is that going to create an extra challenge in trying to get it done? And the second part of that question is, there's a lot of structural stuff that needs to be talked about with Main Street, correct? I mean, it's really an antiquated Main Street in the way it's set up, and that has to be something that's going to be addressed. And that's going to be major work to get that done. Is that fair to say?
So the first part of your question was that if it's not a village, would this be harder to
Is it going to be
accomplish?
more difficult? I mean, a village is, because their interests are only within the village borders, it seems to me it would be a little easier to rally and get those projects done. When you're talking about an unincorporated part of the town, it's just going to be a little more complicated. Or am I wrong? I'm asking.
I don't know that I agree. Yeah, I don't think it's harder. I think, if anything, the town has, this particular town board especially, but over the years, all the administrations have always put a lot of money and time into Hampton Bays. And this, you know, doing that, and especially like you'll hear, you know, Jay talk about all the improvements we've made in different areas, like the Conquag Pavilion and down at the beach, and now we're focusing on Main Street, and we got the Maritime Park at the canal, and all of these areas are meant to bring together a synergy. And I think that not having the village and being a town is what creates that. And so if it was just a segment of it, it would actually be more difficult. So I would argue that it's better that it's not incorporated in this case. And the other part of your question is, I think that the whole purpose was to set out and say, we don't want to be a replica of Patchogue or any of the Riverhead or any of these other locations. We want to be authentically Hampton Bays and present as we understand where we've come from, we know where we're going, and we identify with this look and feel. And that was the important part of it. And we've been through the era of the nightclubs and the drunken tours and all that, and people have decided they didn't really want that. They want more of a family-friendly adult situation where you can come out and have a drink and have fun in a responsible way, but more of a family setup. And ecotourism were things that were said to me along the way of really engaging this as let's take this diamond in the rough and use these assets we have, such as the ocean and the Shinnecock Canal and our vast amount of park space right in the downtown, which none of these other places have, and use them to our advantage to showcase them and highlight them and make them centerpieces.
Okay, Maria, did you want to add something?
Yeah, I totally agree with Janice, and part of what we were looking for when we started came out with the pattern book. They did listen to us, and they put the pattern book in place, and our constituency is interested in having the history and the heritage of Hampton Bays, having the maritime heritage. The park that we're doing by the canal is of great interest to us. We just want to see a way to link everything. They want to see more restaurants and cafes, although I think we excel at this. And another message is they would like to see the town offer some sort of tax incentive to bring shops in, or some sort of incentive. Let me not focus on taxes, it's not my bailiwick. But they want to see the normal shops that any village would have, which would be a toy store, a bookstore, a shoe shop, a shoe repair. Things that we use every day that would make a main street walkable and habitable for our residents. On the other hand, we're not looking for massive development. We don't want to be Patchogue. We don't want to be Riverhead. And that, I know, is a fact as well.
Anybody have any questions? Yes. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Ray.
We are not a village. There's 7 villages in the town of Southampton. And we're at the mercy of the town. And things are done in Hampton Bays that would never happen in the villages. They have more control. For example, it's been 6 years. It's finally closed now. They get the Bel Air Cove closed. And it would have been vacated overnight. We have children there in a single-room occupancy situation. It took 6 years to close that. Another example is the transfer station. The town now while they're expanding it, they want to get a permit for it because of the composting that's going on there. At the same time, they're filing a lawsuit to close sand mines over in North Sea. So it does affect us that we don't have a village to protect us. We rely on the town, and the town always hasn't been a good, has not always looked out for us. And the other thing, I would like to comment, because I did a lot of work. I'm retired now, but we did a lot of work in Long Island City with my brother at development. In the city and all over the metropolitan area, there is a recession, there's a depression in commercial retail. You have to understand that. They say it's the Amazon effect. And I have a good friend who's doing a project in Great Neck. All over the place this is happening with vacant stores. In Astoria, which I'm very familiar with, Steinway, I don't know if any of you are familiar with Steinway, but that's a big shopping center. There's a mire of vacant stores there now, and the city just passed local law 127 to try to register these storefronts and see what they can do to get them occupied. So when you say you want shops and everything, they have to be viable, and we have an off-season here. So, I mean, let's be realistic here. I mean, right now, again, there's a depression in commercial retail. So that's why I think this plan morphed from being more retail, more shops, into more of a residential plan. which I'm leery of, because again, a lot of services have to be provided. And-
Actually, that's not true. It never morphed. And the other thing is, we did a market analysis and condensed the amount of area for VB-type retail in recognition of
Well,
that.
originally in 2017, there were never 248 apartments planned. Okay, I mean, really.
There was
And the
never
second off,
an
I just want to point is that, you know, we have, need a lot of infrastructure. We need a sewer district. We need a sewer district in the area. This will never fly to begin with because the final agency that would have determination is the county health department. And we don't have the sewage treatment needed to handle this development. So that's the first hurdle that has to be done. And I don't know where the money's gonna come from that. I guess it could come from this Community Preservation Fund. But, you know, one thing at a time, we have to get over that first hurdle. Thank you.
Let me give Janice a chance to respond real quick.
Of course, there's a sewer district required. That's part of the whole infrastructure plan to accomplish the downtown. We identified a site. We've received a $50,000 grant to do the engineering report. There's monies to be, there is a process behind it. Rome wasn't built in a day. You don't just build a downtown. That's why we did it Horizon over 10 years. It's not like someone's walking in tomorrow and putting up 250 units. That was never the intention. It was a development scenario to assess something, to see where the thresholds lie. And then that was basically how it works. So
I took a look around this morning. Is it fair to say, I don't think there are a lot of vacancies in Hampton Bays right now in the commercial district, which is unusual because Southampton Village and East Hampton Village in particular have a lot of vacant storefronts. I don't think that's true in Hampton Bays. Is that fair to say?
Well, there's not a lot of vacancy, but there's a lot of turnover. Those storefronts only last a couple of months and then they turn over. I mean, basically, a lot of the mom and pops are gone, they're extinct. The only way businesses sustain this in town is if you own your own building. If you look around, all the shops that are thriving are owner occupied. My storefront, Jessica's, Oakland's, Edgewater, Sundays, Villa Paul, those are owner occupied. The rents are getting ridiculous, and that's the problem why we have such turnover. They only last 3 or 4 months.
Yes, my name's Elizabeth Huck. I live in Hampton Bays. So this question, Janice, is for you. I went to the water district meeting on Wednesday, and one of the things that was said during that meeting had me a little bit concerned about the ability for up to 250 residential units to be built in downtown. And that was that there's salt water coming into the water supply. And part of that is from, I think somebody from the water district said, that means that we're pulling too much out of the ground, too much out of the aquifer now. And we also have concerns about the irrigation causing on the east side of the canal. People are not able to use they have no water from 2 o'clock to 7 in the morning. We also cannot go into a deeper aquifer, because that question was asked. So if we already have a problem with water supply, what are we going to do when we add another 250 residential units that could potentially be built? How are we going to supply water for those additional people?
Thank you, Liz. That's an important question, and that is still, that's part of the whole infrastructure planning of that area. And I think the interconnect thing was figured out where it switches over to Suffolk County water supply on the east side of the canal.
When that was brought up, what they said was that interconnection with Suffolk County water produced even less pressure than.
When it switches over?
Yes.
So I wasn't at that meeting.
So that's not a solution.
No, I was just saying I thought that they, had worked it out. There is never a time when anybody's getting any permit to do anything when there's not the infrastructure and compatibility in place. So all of those issues have to be resolved. That's we have to find the additional places to put it, whatever the well is that they need to offset, and produce that. We have an immense amount of area that we're not using for, it's just the way that the water district is set up, I think, the supply and demand and how that's worked out. And I'm not a water engineer or a wastewater engineer, but my view is that we must make sure all of that infrastructure is properly in place, and I'm sure that you and your friend next to you will make sure of it too. But, you know, by the time anything happens, so that, you know, there is no question that those permits are needed and will be figured out.
Actually, I'll let Jay, you want to come in? Jay, it's true, right? You can talk about adding apartment units, but until you have sewage and water to make that happen, you're not going to get approval from the county even.
And with development, you know, you have to have infrastructure, right? It might be electrical infrastructure, it might be water infrastructure. First of all, the form-based code does not create 240 or so units of new development. It is additional development, but if the properties that are in that boundary were developed according to zoning, there still would be quite a number of new units. So it's maybe, Janice, what, it's like 140 additional? Or
Yeah, 147.
147
Additional
new.
to what could be built
And
there
that
as of current.
147 apartments, I don't know that in itself is necessitating a new well. So right now, there's 11 wells. What the experts tell us, based on the growth of Hampton Bays into the future, which includes, you know, some smaller homes becoming larger homes, some vacant lots becoming, built out all throughout Hampton Bays, that the likelihood is there will need to be another well. And there'll be also lots of new customers to help offset the costs of that well. But, that is part of the plan. We know that we need that. In our capital project, we have accounted for that, I think, in the 5th or 6th year, that there would be an additional well constructed in the Hampton Bays Water District.
Maria, did you want to add something?
Jay basically covered it. I was going to say that Liz's question was my concern at the meeting as well. And when I spoke to John Bouvier, about it, he said two things. Number one, that a sewer system or a septic system in the next couple of years is going to be totally recyclable to begin with. And number two, that there is provision for an additional well should the need arise.
And Rick, you're new on the board, but it seems to me that one of the things with mostly sewage, more than water, but the technology is evolving so much, it's a moving target, isn't it? I mean, it's really difficult to predict where we might end up.
Well, let me be clear on one fact here. Right now in the village business, if everybody got together from the end of Springville to the store next to me on Montauk Highway, from Good Ground Park to the train station, right now you could go through the regular permit process and build 100 extra units right now. The new overlay district adds 147 of mixed use to that, whether it be retail, professional, or for apartments, condos, however it ends up when a plan comes to us. It's 147 units. We're not talking about becoming Patchogue. We're not talking about becoming Riverhead with 5-story buildings. You know, the maximum on Good Ground Park and Good Ground Road is 3 stories. Main Street is not going to change. It's 2-story buildings, hopefully butting up against each other with nice alleyways, little cul-de-sacs, little bypasses, so you don't have to go all the way down Montauk Highway to get to Good Ground, to get to the south part of town. You'll have these little cut-throughs that you can take. You'll be able to get in and out of the park a little bit easier, okay? So please don't get bogged down on that 247 number. It's not really realistic in a short period of time. Could take generations, and there is a gap in between there where the town and the planning department will look at it again and say, you know what, this isn't working the way it thought it was, we need to slow it down. So I think Janice can speak on that later, but that's my belief on this, so do not be scared by the 247. As far as the new sewer district and all, I think it could only help. We are looking for a location for a sewer district just in case we ever get to that point. It helps all businesses in town. It helps the little mom and pops that are there already expand because there is a flow usage that you need for the county health department. You can only have so many tables, so many bathrooms in your restaurant, depending on that. And I think all those little things added on to our mom and pops will help our local businesses that have been here for years.
Okay, Ray, real quick, you had something to add?
right now, you couldn't build any of those because you'd have to get the health department to approve, and we don't have a sewer system. You don't have enough flow. So right now, what you're advocating could not be built without the infrastructure build-out, which would have to be done by the town. That's the only point I wanted to make. I mean, and the other thing about the water, about these septic systems, the new ones, they don't touch like PFOAs, POFs, 4,1-dioxane. These are new, they're called emerging contaminants, and they need very expensive treatment. You need like carbon filters for the PFOAs. Luckily, we don't have a 4,1-dioxane, I don't know if I'm saying that properly, problem. But if we do, that treatment is, the water gets infused with hydrogen peroxide and it has to be exposed to ultraviolet light to get rid of that. So you'd have to have a binary treatment. Incredibly expensive. So going forward, these are things, they're called emerging contaminants, we might have to deal with. That's why I was suggesting, I asked the engineers from D&B about maybe these wells should only be, that's site one, they're 600 feet east of the firehouse. They should only be used in the summer. This way we wouldn't have to winterize them, build a building over them. So, I mean, there's a lot of things moving around here, and we have to be concerned about all these things. And what we did here is we had something that was always plentiful. We had really good water, and it was very cheap. And we've managed to make it scarce and very expensive to treat it now, to get water that we need.
Yeah, that's a bigger issue, no question.
Part of the process was March 3rd, 2016. That was the first work session. So this is because I'm an effective part, so I have to use my phone. So, Ray, Jeff will definitely ask some more questions about concerns, because it was represented at that water meeting. It's not about the well, doing the well, it's the quantity of the water. You could dig wells forever. You're not going to get water, just like California right now. So the fact that this started 4 years ago, that was supposed to be much smaller in scale, Janice, that was supposed to enable our hardworking business owners to actually get to their village business levels. As Ray said, you can't build 100 units. It was very simple. It was supposed to give the residential, the commercial property owners the ability, whatever situation, to be able to expand their commercial businesses, to enable additional foot traffic, and somehow it turned into a big urban plan. And whether you don't agree, Janice, or not, that it morphed. As a resident who has followed this for 4 long years, I respectfully disagree. So what Simone said, 4 years in, we're still kind of apart. And I have to turn to the town and say, why did that happen? Why are we so far apart?
Let me give Janice a chance to respond to that.
I don't think that was ever the intention. I've been involved since the beginning. I've been involved so far back from changing the VB all along. It was said we should change it. No, we shouldn't. Leave it alone. We left it alone. Nothing's happening. Let's do something. We need to create a revitalization plan. The original GEIS said to do it, downtown Hamlet Center plan. One of the alternatives in the GEIS is the VB with sewage. That's an alternative, that we looked at. That's how we know we could do 101 units, just as of right with the sewage treatment. If you want someone to invest and realize a return on their investment, they are going to try to get the highest and best uses that they can get so that they can develop in the way that we want, which is extremely high quality materials, architecture, all the, other attributes that you have deemed to be appropriate all cost someone money. And so these uses, the highest, these uses need to be, the zoning code allows a significant amount of uses. It's not just residential or retail. There's other things involved. There's other things you can do there. You can do a performing arts center if you wanted to. So the zoning code is the same way, similarly to any other zoning code. You have a piece of property, you have a code, you look down and say, what can I do here? Is it permitted? Is it special exception? What is the town going to reasonably expect from me to get a permit? And that is how land use works. Being far apart or not. And we did a very sophisticated review, which is to look at a hypothetical scenario. Whether or not that scenario is going to be realized in full remains to be seen. But we looked at the worst case so that we can analyze all those, impacts at that point and look back. So that is how it is. If someone's going to put 100 units maybe and stop there, that might be what happens. They might put 50. I mean, we looked at the review. We put a cap at 248. We reviewed the difference between the 101 that you could realize under as of right with sewage and the difference, to the form-based code. We analyzed what you need to accomplish those things, whether or not it's worth it for someone to opt in. It's all optional. You can just do the VB and call it a day. You don't have to do any of it if you're a property owner there and you don't want to. It is completely 100% an optional overlay district. If you do opt in, then you'll be expected to share parking, you'll be expected to pay toward these infrastructure improvements, to pay back on what we've laid out. So that's how that plan accommodates that.
Jay,
So-
you want to add something?
Maybe, I'm not sure that everybody understands fully how zoning works, but zoning in many ways works like DNA works. You don't take the DNA from a pine tree and hope you'll grow a rose bush. It's not going to happen. You could wish it becomes a rose bush. It's not going to become a rose bush. There is zoning in place for downtown Hampton Bays, and it is going to lead to more of the same, more strip mall-like development. It's not anything along the lines of what the community is telling us they want. And we have reached out through charrettes, through online surveys, trying to get the pulse. What do people want? We've got thousands of responses. People want a vibrant, walkable downtown. Small scale, not these big box stores. And so we're trying to put the DNA in place that gives you exactly what you want. And that takes time, Gail. It's not something that we could do overnight because we had to do environmental review. We took the time not to tell you what we want, but to hear what you want and then transform that into what is called the form-based code for Hampton Bays, the guidelines that leads to the development that the community has articulated that they want. And those things, to get it right, it definitely takes time. But other than that, you're going to just keep wishing downtown transforms into whatever, a Sag Harbor or a Greenport. It's not going to happen because those things aren't allowed. Those smaller retails, those outdoor cafes, whatever it is, you can't, it's not going to happen. You're going to get the parking lots with the stores behind the parking lots, and you're going to lose your sense of place in downtown Hampton Bays. So if we don't change the code, it's not going to be this beloved downtown that you want it to be. We have to do it. I think it's imperative.
Ray, you wanted to add something? Let me say real quickly, I think we could probably do a press session just on the water situation, and maybe we will at some future point, because I mean, that's obviously a key issue, and it ties into all this. But I think we could talk about that as a separate issue at some point. But Ray, go ahead.
Well, I just want to say I find myself in agreement with the supervisor. It takes time, and that's really, we do support revitalization. I do want the same things that you just enumerated. But the problem is that it's an execution, and so far, the town in Hampton Bays, it hasn't done well. You know, we had the park, we didn't get bathrooms for 3 years. But, you know, when I was in, I have a degree in planning from the University of Buffalo School of Architecture, but I wanted to be a firefighter, but later on when I retired, I did planning. But we talked about symmetrical planning and asymmetrical planning. And the park was asymmetrical planning. It was like pulled out of the air and put there. And now we're trying to do a plan so we can integrate it with Main Street, and it's difficult. Because we're going to run into another problem of encroachment on parkland. You know, once something is a park, you just can't build a road through it. It's in the state constitution. There's a legal challenge now. So I'm very concerned about the execution of these, of what we got here. I mean, we need this infrastructure, which needs to be done first or in conjunction with development. Not like we get these buildings and all of a sudden it's an afterthought, oh, we need to do the drive-through from Good Ground Road to 24. Because, for example, 2 weeks ago, I was called to comment on Supervisor Steineman had said that there was interest in making a boutique motel at the diner. And I thought that was a great idea. I said, well, we're going to have the catering hall down at the other end of town. People need a place to stay. I think that's a wonderful idea. Now, in the plan, they don't want, 2 weeks later, they want that 24 to connect with Good Ground Road. That means they would have to condemn that property. They would probably need 4 rods. A rod's 16 and a half feet, it's a surveyor term, to do the road. It's got to divide it. So I'm really concerned about the execution of these plans. That's the main thing. I mean, all this stuff is needed. If you don't look at it, where's it going to come from? The town, it fits and starts. They don't have it in the budget, and we need that. We're stuck with the situation as we were with the park. I think it was 3.5 years before we got bathrooms. So that's where I'm coming from on this thing.
Okay, let me let you answer real quick, and I'll come to Maria. You had something to...
I'll start with the bathroom issue at Good Ground Park. And we had thought we were going to get that paid for through grant money. That didn't come through, and then we moved quickly to build that comfort station. But this idea that Hampton Bays isn't getting its share from the town, or the town isn't serving Hampton Bays well, that's malarkey. I mean, if you look at just in the last few years, I'll just give you some of the numbers. Good Ground Park development was something like $4 million. The Ponquag Beach renovation, the pavilion, was $3 million. Dune Road addressing the flooding, $1 million. The Ed Warner Senior Pier that was done, $2 million, the fishing pier. The commercial dock, we put another $1 million into that. We did the historic restoration of the Liaison Hat Shop, the Canoe Place Chapel, and the Tiana Life Saving Station. That's around $2 million combined. We had the county come out and dredge, put 90,000 cubic yards out on the beach. That was a $3 million dredge project. And the federal government is about next week to begin a $10 to $11 million dredge project. And plus all this planning money and all these other things. Just those things I named alone is close to $30 million, 27 to $30 million that has come in to Hampton Bays. Largely town funds, but also the town reaching out to other levels of government to come into Hampton Bays. No other area of the town has gotten anything close to that. So the town board is paying a lot of attention. Is the Hampton Bays moving in the right direction? Last year, where property values in 2019 were going down across the East End, Hampton Bays went up by 10%. School taxes, and Lars is here, school population went down, school tax rate went down, what was it, by 8%, something like that? So, for the first time I heard, school taxes go up every year. They went down, the tax rate went down in this last cycle, and I think possibly the cycle before that too, Lars, right? It's 2 years in a row. Was that?
Just a little bit the first year.
A little bit the first year. So is that moving in the right direction? Property values going up, tax rates going down, new recreational opportunities, infrastructure, flooding and other things, flooding problems being addressed. To me, I think the town is serving Hampton Bays well.
Let me give Maria a chance. You've been waiting patiently. You want to say?
Well, I think Jay said most of what I was going to say. When I first moved to the town in '71, and for a long time, all I heard were complaints about what wasn't happening. And I think that the town board has done a tremendous job in the last 10, 15 years of turning it around and making it making a positive impact on the hamlet with all the structures, all the places that Jay mentioned. I was involved with the park from the very beginning. We sat on the committee for I don't know how many years, and there was such effort and such planning that went into it. And the comfort stations were there from the beginning, perhaps not the permanent ones, but to present it as if they weren't comfort stations is an insult to those of us that worked on it. The town, instead of putting it on the taxpayer, waited until they could get money to have permanent and useful comfort stations built. So there are two sides to every story, and you ought to look at both sides.
All right, Janice, you want to add something real quick?
Oh, and just that, along those lines with the park, I mean, imagine how, you can't be short-sighted about like a 38-acre park in a downtown. That's like saying they should have, just not built Central Park or something. I mean, that is like an amazing asset that the Roscoe family, the town bought it from, and to, maybe it's been years and we're still developing it and it's over time, it's still a very, very important asset, and I think that you just have to show, progress over time, and we keep plugging away at it, and the commitment here is to keep doing that, and that's what's important.
Let me get some input from the audience here.
Hi, Christy File. I'm with B&B Bank in Hampton Bays. Just have a quick question, and please forgive my lack of knowledge here, but is there current or proposed coding for what we're looking to bring into Hampton Bays as far as same-type businesses, like limiting the amount of pharmacies that we can have, or however many corporate type of establishments we could have, like as far as Macy's or something that is a chain along those lines? Is there currently or proposed?
That would be considered formula retail restrictions, and we really haven't done that because you get into, commerce clauses and things that we've been advised by our town attorney's office are not permissible.
Thank you.
Is that a type of spot zoning?
It's more about restricting free market, and that, that's the difficulty of, when you get these really high rents and situations where only certain people, like, you see in Southampton Village, they don't like that there's only real estate offices or banks, they want the other kinds of rents. But we don't have a code in Hampton Bays that's saying, no, you can only have 2 nail salons or something like that. We have not gotten that far.
Hi, my name's Mary Payzan. I am, as Janice referred to me, Liz's friend sitting in the corner.
Sorry?
I have a name. I'm taking a little different subject matter here. I like trees and I like open space. A little bit of my recent research has led me to believe that there are a number of instances where the town has allowed non-park purposes on parkland. I love the animal shelter, don't get me wrong, but I've learned that we lost parkland and gave it to East Quogue in order to get the animal shelter. So you have a number of facilities there that, at least at first blush, seem to violate public trust doctrine that goes back to the ancient Greeks, if I may say. So my question, on the overlay district, there's a 75, I think, % reduction in open space, and you mentioned something about trees being in the plan. So I'd like to know if there's a 75% reduction in open space, what's in the plan, or what will the town do to preserve some open space on Main Street? I mean, we've all talked about buildings and structures, so I'd like to know what the town's going to do to ensure that we have open space, that our parkland is protected, and I'd like to know what the requirement for tree planting is on Main Street.
Open space and green spaces on Main Street, right?
The characterization of it being a reduction in open space comes from the analysis that shows that right now it's wooded, these parcels that are between the infill development I'm talking about, between Main Street and the park, are, some of them, they are woodland areas. They're not open space parkland areas. They are private property owned by someone who can develop them. Those people, so the assessment went, well, if they develop them at 100%, which is that reduction, that's the worst case scenario. Is everybody at the same time going to tear down every tree on their property? Not likely. However, we look at, in those documents, we look at the worst case scenario and what would happen. So the reduction of open space isn't necessarily, we're giving away some kind of parkland. This is private property that someone's going to develop. And if they were to develop it in the VB way, they would still be, putting the buildings, and they have a certain amount of lot coverage, et cetera. We added a certain standard of, the tree spacing and the amount of trees. You'll have, like, wherever you have sidewalks, you'll have the regular spacing of tree pits and trees. There's a percentage, and I can't remember off the top of my head how much, and it's all like kind of laid out in that form-based code. But to be clear, I would like to say that's, assuming that it's some kind of parkland right now, we're not reducing parkland, and the 38-acre park is the open space that's remaining.
So very quickly, on Main Street, are there any provisions for the creation of maintenance or of open space?
On Main Street?
I don't want to talk highway, I'm sorry, I was full of it.
Are we at the stage in this conversation where we talk about green spaces and things like that on Main Street as part of a redevelopment?
One of the biggest concerns was that there wasn't really enough sidewalk space, and you're on a state road. So one of the problems is like to have the state roadway and then the amount of sidewalk space requires buildings to be pushed back. In the instance that someone wants to do that, we're not saying anybody has to touch it, you can keep your building the way it is. Or if you said, you know, this building needs to be moved or demolished, something's wrong with it, we want to rebuild it, at that point, we would say you need to move it back, add more sidewalk space, and add trees. So that's what the code says. It also accounts for the bioswales and other rain garden type vegetation.
Okay, we have a question back here.
Hi, my name is Joyce King. I lived in Hampton Bays for 25 years, and 3 years ago we moved to Quogue because we got taxed out of Hampton Bays. So I'm listening to all of this about the renovation of downtown Hampton Bays, and I think it's a great idea. But my concern is that there seems to be a density issue in Hampton Bays to start with. The taxes are very high. Everything you're talking about is going to cost a whole lot of money. And I'm not saying it's good, bad, or indifferent, but taxes are going to continue to increase. And I understand that a large percentage of the taxes are based on the school, but the more people you put into the district, the more children are going to be educated. And I think the school's done a great job of keeping their costs down, but the rest of it's going through the roof. How do you expect people to stay in Hampton Bays?
I'm gonna go ahead and let you start us off, Ray, but I want to give you guys a chance to answer as well.
I'm very big on taxes. I do go to the senior center a few days a week, and I have a group. I'm 70 years old. I have a group of guys around my age, and it's a problem. I mean, we have people, like we were discussing, one guy was telling me, well, I paid my first half, and I don't have the money for the second half. And, you know, we're seniors, our earning power has diminished. And quite frankly, we pay the highest tax rate in the town of Southampton, except for Eastport, which had improprieties up there. So, and I think it's really a testament, and I don't throw around compliments, as you can imagine. I throw them around, I got manhole cutters. But as our superintendent, Lars Clemenson, he's done a great job in our school and the school board. And we are giving these kids a very good education, and I think it's because of him. And I think he's wonderful, but, so everybody's taking credit. That's what I'm very concerned about, is our taxes. You know, if you go in Ireland, we have like, the taxes here are moderate compared to in Ireland. I have a home in Syosset. My taxes are like $21,000 there. So, if that got shifted out here, we have a lot of people that couldn't afford to pay those. So we gotta keep that, we have to be cognizant of that and keep that in mind.
This goes back to an earlier question, though, Jay. Those costs would be spread out over the whole town, correct? And
Those what, I'm sorry?
the costs of work in Hampton Bays wouldn't just fall on
So
Hampton Bays residents.
If it was a village, it would fall just on the village. But no, these costs are spread out. But I think understanding taxes and why taxes are high in some area and low in others, it's very complicated. But if you look at the areas that tend to have lower taxes, it's because they have either a higher concentration of summer homes, high-valued properties without kids in the school, or they have more tax rateables. Tax rateables, commercial businesses, not putting kids in the school system. I had 2 people last week come to me from Hampton Bays and thank me because their actual taxes, what they actually paid, went down this year over the year before. Now, why? And it didn't happen for everybody, but it did happen for some. Why is it? Because there's been a lot of homes in Hampton Bays that have been altered from year-round homes, small homes, where somebody came in, bought a $500,000 home, and now it's a $5 million home. It was torn down, and it may be a good thing or bad thing for a community, but in terms of taxes, if one slice of the pie suddenly widens, every other slice shrinks down. The town is going to collect what it needs to run the town. The school's going to collect what it needs to run the school. If the school population isn't increasing, they don't have to build out more, and the town's budget is pretty much staying the course, in pace with inflation. More people come in, bigger, $500,000 house becomes a $5 million house, commercial businesses get built. what the individual homeowner in Hampton Bays should be paying less and less each year. So if you look at communities like Bridgehampton or Amagansett or Sagaponack, their taxes are extremely low. Their assessed valuation is extremely high. So it's helped those who've been able to stay in those communities. They get to enjoy very low taxes. Hampton Bays will have to decide, as more and more people want to build summer homes in this area because of all the great amenities, how much of a summer home community do you want to be versus a year-round working-class community? Getting that balance right. So for a while, it was definitely moving in the direction of more and more year-round workforce type of housing. Now it's turned, and now you're seeing more summer homes. And I think it's a real interesting question for the community to grapple with, is what kind of community does it want to be? It doesn't want to push all of its workforce out. That's you and me, right? We're the workforce in many cases. But some summer homes may help push the real estate taxes down. So it's a conversation perhaps for the future. But right now it seems to have turned a corner. The scale has tilted in a different direction, and Hampton Bays values, instead of going down every year, the property values seem to be going up every year.
Candace, you want to add something?
I just wanted to point out that the SECRA also looked at the economic impact, the tax impact at that threshold build-out, and it would be tax positive over $1.2 million if it were built out that way, and that would accommodate whatever additional density and then have a tax positive benefit to the community.
That was with ridiculous assumptions of only 24 students at 248 apartments. You know, it's science fiction.
It's based on the Rutgers study that has empirical evidence.
Well, I'm willing to bet you that there'll be more than 24 students out of 248 apartments.
But some of those apartments may well be seasonal apartments.
They most likely will probably be summer,
Well, we don't know that. We don't know that.
we don't.
And some year-round houses will, during the course of this development, will become summer homes, reducing the amount of kids in the schools.
You know, we're in about the 11th year of recovery, and the property values in all these villages has exploded. Finally, after the 11th year, ours have gone up 10%, so we lag the rest of the community. I mean, that's just the facts.
Maybe Lars is here. Lars, your school population, I know your building is built for like 2,200 or something like that, but from your peak of what you were in terms of school population, where are you now?
Hello, everyone.
Introduce yourself.
We hit a peak in 2014-15 of 2,145 students. We're at 2010 right now. We're seeing smaller classes come into kindergarten. So our elementary school has smaller class sizes than we are graduating students. So our 12th grade, for example, that's about 160 students. Our incoming kindergarten, or our current kindergarten, is about 125, 130 students. So that's where you're seeing that the school district the enrollment has kind of plateaued in the last couple of years and is eking down. When you eke down in enrollment, it's sort of counterintuitive that you say, why isn't my school budget going down? It takes more of a decline for that to happen when you start not needing as many teachers anymore, not needing as many school buses anymore. But until you hit that tipping point, those classrooms still have to be turned on, have to have a teacher in front of them, and have to have a school bus as well. So capacity-wise, we'll never meet the fire code capacity because they're big buildings. But Hampton Bays, for a generation, since 2004, bucked a trend on Long Island where school-age enrollment was going down. Hampton Bays was going up until that high water mark in 2014-15.
Hi, my name is Susan Bonfreddi, and I own Village Real Estate in Hampton Bays. I've been a Main Street owner of business for, maybe 48 years now. I grew up in Hampton Bays. I also run the Hampton Bays Beautification Association. And I've been involved in the organization for over 25 years. I want to go back to trees and open space, your comment. And I just want to remind everybody that we have the pergola, and the Vince Canusio Trail is all open space or park area. It was purchased by the town, and grant money was raised to put that in. We have been planting trees in Hampton Bays for 35 years. And every year,
any tree that dies or it becomes broken or a car runs into it, we replace it. We replace at least 15 trees a year. We also go up and down Main Street and we deep root feed the trees. And not only that, we trim the trees, all on Main Street. Occasionally, there's a horrible old giant oak tree that has broken branches, and we get in touch with the county, and they come and they take care of that. So we've been trying very hard to keep the Main Street streetscape alive and well and healthy. We have 7 acres across from Katrinka's on the north side of the road that the town purchased a number of years ago, and that's all green space. We have green space that the town owns a large piece of property right behind the Welcome to Hampton Bay sign next to the diner. We also have a beautiful green space at the flagpole area over by the atrium, and that goes and wraps all the way around up to the sign at the atrium on Route 24. Last year, the Hampton Bays Beautification installed a rain garden bioswale at the post office. We raised the money privately. I want to commend the Parks and Recreation Department in Hampton Bays because they do an amazing job. They help us, in addition to the beautification, we take care of all the medians, we take care of all the hanging pots, urns, flowers on Main Street, and we make sure that it's viable. We are very grateful to the town of Southampton because they have been helping us without a question for the last 25 years. It's a public-private partnership, and we are very appreciative of all the things that the town has helped us to create a better place of quality of life in Hampton Bays. I appreciate all of you coming here today, and there's a lot of different issues, but I do want to compliment that I do feel the future of Hampton Bays is going to be amazing.
You know, I want to add too that the civic energy that you have with 3 organizations locally demonstrates that there's a lot of buy-in from the Hampton Bays community, but maybe one of the problems is that there isn't as much coordination between all that energy, and it sometimes can work against itself in places. So, we had a question over here.
Hi, I'm Deborah Williams. I'm just a resident here in Hampton Bays. Just came in 2015-2016 school year. And I wanted to know about the development potential for Squiretown Lodge, that whole area over there. I go there for the classes, for the exercise and stuff, and I always look around and say, boy, this could be amazing. And I wonder, with the ecotourism thought that was raised earlier and the idea of expanding the usefulness of the green space, what is the plan, if there is one, and if not, how do we make a plan?
I mean, either one of us. I mean, I'll start. So you're talking about the old Girl Scout camp, which has a name to Camp something, I don't remember. Tekawitha. You know, so it's a pretty big property. It's like 60 acres or something. It's a pretty big piece of property. The town purchased it with community preservation funds. It does have an amazing potential there. I mean, it's great. The old lodge, the bigger building isn't used. You're talking about the smaller building that gets used for yoga classes. I know some Eagle Scout projects have happened there recently to rebuild the platforms. We do have plans to rebuild the walkway that goes from the park down to the beach below. So that's probably going to happen next year. I have brought some groups there, not-for-profit groups, that were interested in running camp type of activities. But for whatever reason, the town was reluctant to let other groups fix up the buildings there, because the buildings need to get fixed up. So, you know, I would like that. I'd like to see that more used for camping, for kids. It's the view from up there is tremendous. I know some people don't like to go into the park because of tick concerns and things like that, but I think if we could open up some trails, that would help. But it's really an unutilized facility. Next door to it, which was part of the original purchase, is a house. It was the old caretaker's house, and that's sort of embarrassing because that house was supposedly originally bought for affordable housing purposes, never put to that purpose, never separated from the park itself. So we are looking to take that house, which is falling apart now, and try to sell it to somebody and maybe get some money back for our affordable housing programs. But there is an abandoned house on the corner that was part of the original park that it's just sitting there falling into disrepair. But Janice, do you want to say anything else about the park itself?
No, just that I agree. It's an untapped diamond, and we really should, that could be another initiative that, we've got a lot of them.
I think Maria had something to add here.
I had nothing to add on the park. My issue was something else. Earlier, someone said that with the development would come a lot of more cars and auto traffic into town. And I think the one gold mine we have is a railroad station right in the center of town. And it would let so many residents from the city come out here, pick up a summer place, and not have to drive. And if we had the bike pass and the bike rentals, that would cover it, and people wouldn't need to drive.
Good point. Sir, you had a question? Introduce yourself.
Yeah, sure. Hello?
I can hear you.
Okay, Robert J. Just a few points, and much of it's been covered, or some of it. One, the taxes. They're extremely high in Hampton Bays, Jay, and when you say it's a great situation that assessment goes up, value
goes up, yes.
Tax rate goes down. From my experience, the result is my wife and I are paying considerably more in taxes each year. So it's a little disingenuous, or at least it needs to be viewed in a slightly different perspective, the issue with the taxes. For most homeowners, I would think I'm typical. Taxes are raising, and we pay a very large burden in Hampton Bays. That's one. Regarding the park, it's a wonderful park, even though it took some time to get everything correct. But I'd call it a passive park. Maybe that's a wrong term. And I've mentioned to you privately, or Frank in the town, and Simone made the point. You're getting traffic there 10 to 13 weekends a year, or days. Something like a dog run, it's very simple. A dog park brings people. But I go to the park quite often. I don't want to belabor it. It's hardly used. There's hardly people there at any time of the year. There really is. It's a very quiet park. So Simone's point is well taken, to get more activity there. It's also a very modest playground. I don't see that many families are using that small little playground area. It's not a playground that is commensurate with most parks in the scope of it, in the size of it. Another issue, I think the town's going in the right way, Hampton Bays, in most directions. I like CVS. I go to CVS. But having a CVS versus the movie theater is not a positive. It's a negative to our town. The other thing I'd mention is that there's always been this battle in Hampton Bays in any meetings I've gone to, development versus no development. So people in Hampton Bays have always been somewhat wary of development or doing things that will bring more people. Sometimes I think to our detriment. I'm just one person. I thought we should have had a restaurant in the evening at the Ponquag Beach. It would have been wonderful for our community, and we would have been the ones using it most of the time. But it would have also maybe brought other people to come, Hampton Bays, and I can sit out and have a meal at the beach. People didn't, seem to be wary about doing it. I hope it's something we can revisit. It would be positive. The last point I'd make, and it hasn't really come up, or just very peripherally, and maybe it can be addressed. Traffic is a huge issue in this town. The Main Street backs up. The west to east traffic in the morning, which people would, generally call the trade parade, it's difficult in Hampton Bays. I live south of Canute Place, just anecdotally, though I've mentioned it in meetings. You can wait 25, 30 minutes. That's not exaggeration. Just to reach the traffic light. If you're south of Canute Place, the traffic light by the Shell station. Because Main Street's completely backed up. That traffic light, for me, I'm just one person again, is not a positive. It's caused this terrible traffic issue in the town, and so how are we going to address that as one of the other issues that hasn't really been discussed in too much depth?
That's actually another topic that could be its own press session, which we maybe should have at some point, is talk about the traffic. I want to talk about, I actually want to ask about the theater. Because that's an example, I think you probably would have unanimity in this room that nobody thinks the theater becoming a CVS is a good idea. But there's really, wait for the but, there's really nothing the town can do to stop that, am I correct? I mean, really, what is the mechanism that would be used to stop that from happening?
Movie theaters, unfortunately, are closing all over the place. They get Amazon, Netflix, they're getting movies on HBO and streaming on their computers. You don't find the video rental stores anymore. They're all gone. The Blockbusters went out of business. We're trying to keep Macy's here, and that's going to be a challenge too, because Macy's is closing stores everywhere because Amazon has taken over retail. So I love the idea of having the movie theater here because it creates foot traffic, but I can't force them to be a failing business. I can't make them lose money. I can't just provide tax incentives. I don't have that power to do that. I do think we need a performing arts center. I do think we need culture, because that you can't get on your TV, right? We need live performances, whether it's comedy or Shakespeare or music. If we could have a performing arts venue indoors year-round, Good Ground Park is great as an outdoor venue, but all year round cultural activities here in downtown Hampton Bays, I think that would really help, and I think that's where we need to focus on that. But it's sad, even Montauk, which is a big tourist town, you would think could support a movie theater, closed there. Is everywhere the movies are closing, and even Southampton Village, they've come to me too, they're looking to close that. That's unfortunate too. So you can't just operate a business. The only time you're busy is when the new Avengers movie comes out, and they don't want to wait to get it on, on their TV set. It just doesn't work, and it's unfortunate.
I'm sorry, Jay. This leads to a question I actually want to ask Simone and Rick as the two business owners on Main Street. And let me ask you a tough question. And Maria, I apologize in advance because I don't mean this in any way but the suggestion about some of the businesses that we would like to see on Main Street. I hear that in other places as well, in Bridgehampton and other places talk about shoe repair shops and toy stores. Is that being realistic about where we can go in the future? Or has life changed to a point where we need to have a different vision for Main Street in small towns? It's just not able to support that kind of business. Rick, you run a retail shop, and I imagine that's got to be the most difficult thing in the world right now.
I'll take that right off the bat. I mean, our numbers in the 80s were way higher than they are now. We used to have to just compete with Smith Haven Mall. And if that young adult or the parent could get you to Smith Haven Mall, that was my competition. Then it became Route 58 in Riverhead. It became the box store. It became an outlet that had pretty much every brand that I carried. And then with the advent of Amazon and the internet, we have gone from second on the list to about 7. And it's very difficult. Luckily we do have locals who do, shop with us, and we do a lot with the kids and the teamwork that we do, and we branch out into more specialty items that you can't just pick up a phone and get. But it is difficult. It's been a tough road on Main Street, I think, for a lot of people, and that's why we don't see the shoe repair stores and the little dress shops and all that, because we tend not to think of our locals first. We tend to go Route 58, and it's convenient. I can yell at my wife. My wife takes an exercise class. Next thing I come home and she's got those little bands that you pull on the counter. I'm like, what are you doing? She's like, I got them at Target. I said, I have these in the store, And unfortunately, that's what happened. She went to wherever she was going, to Michael's or whatever in Riverhead, and now she finished her day shopping and she was done. She never came back to Main Street. But
that's a new reality. And Simone, in the restaurant industry, you are affected by that same trend, correct? Because when foot traffic goes down because the retailers aren't seeing the shoppers, you're going to see less business as well. Fair enough?
Yeah, absolutely. One point I want to make is earlier we were talking about how come there isn't other little stores like bookstores and stuff like that. But sometimes we work against each other here and against us. That the town started that bike rental that you could rent a bike at the post office and then down at the beach. You know, that affects the mom and pop. There's a gentleman right across from the train tracks there, the bike store. You know, he's a really nice guy. He's a local guy. And here we are, he's trying to make a living in town, and we're talking about the turnover. That's the turnover. How long is that guy going to last there if we keep renting bikes at the post office and not through him? That's, you know, that's the thing that we need to look at. You come off the train, you want to go, you see a bike rental, you want to take it, go down to the beach, make a bike path, that's great. But now you could go rent bikes all over the place and put this guy out of business. How is that? You want nice little boutique stores? That's not how we do it.
See, these are the conversations that I think are not taking place about the real reality of how a Main Street survives in a small town these days. That's the reality. Amazon is a reality. The outlets are a reality. Route 58. But what can be done to address that? Janice, maybe you're the best person to ask. I'm not asking you to solve that problem. Let me just be clear about that. You have 30 seconds. What's the best way to solve that problem? But how do we need to change our thinking to start to approach an answer to this question? Because we aren't getting anywhere by talking about wanting to do that if the businesses aren't going to survive.
And I definitely don't have all the answers at all to this, but I think one of the biggest components is that if the potential future of you can just think up what you want and tell your artificial intelligence to go fetch it for you and it appears 3D printed somewhere to you, I don't know what you're going to do in that kind of future, except that we're all still humans, we all still need to eat, we all still need outdoor nature, so all those things will always be there. And whether or not the robots take over, I don't know. But at least we can create a scenario where we're all there together and able to interact, and the small things that you need right at your fingertips that you can't wait the next day for will be the businesses that thrive, the things that help you in your whatever you're doing. You need a pair of binoculars because you're bird watching at the park, that will be available to you there, or smaller things, or your Amazon locker. One of the stores is just a place where it gets shipped to. So you go there, you get whatever you ordered from your couch, you go take a yoga class, you get some food, you meet your friends, those kinds of things. I think the human interaction and the human entertainment, the components of life will remain and stay, and the things that foster those things will be what thrive.
Do you want to say it, Maria?
I'm just going to say something quickly, because I teach for a business in New York that is strongly affected by Amazon and by the downturn in the retail. And what we've learned is that you have to offer things that will entice people to come into your store. Find some sort of activity for the children, or a book club, or an author signing, or, you know, an expert on shoes. I don't know, but there are ways to combat this.
Rick, did you want to add something?
Yeah, before we really get closed here, I just want to, we talk about the extra units that are proposed and the apartments and everything in Main Street, and we call it workforce housing, we call it affordable housing. To me, it's more suburban lifestyle housing. People are changing. My kid lives in Oregon now. He wouldn't think of cutting his own lawn. I mean, these kids need apartments. We need close to 2,000 units in the town of Southampton for our young people to stay here, to put on raised part. I have friends too that are in their 80s that can't afford their taxes anymore. You know, their retirement's not keeping up with their property taxes. How wonderful would it be if they could get an apartment overlooking Good Ground Park, where they can take in a concert a few times a year and walk to Liggett's and walk to their supermarket, you know, and have everything right in town. And if they do want to go to Southampton, they can walk to the train and take the train to Southampton. All that within this beautiful community little hub where we have people walking. We will get, I don't know if you want to call it retail, but we will get more businesses. You know, we'll get more flower shops, we'll get more food places. It'll come as the people are there and they start utilizing Main Street. I mean, that's my vision. My vision is that the young people I want to stay here have their first stepping stone to their home, first home, and that the elderly will have a chance to stay here. I hate seeing my former coaches, my mentors, the historians of this town moving out of Hampton Bays because they have to. They're just too elderly to keep up with the day-to-day duties of keeping a home, or they just can't afford it. I would love for that to turn into something like that.
You know, I want to close, but there's one question. I'm surprised this didn't come up at all in the conversation. The canal project. Do we generally consider that to be favorable for the downtown business? Simone, is that going to be a positive thing for the downtown business district?
I believe it is, because the people that are coming here to buy these townhomes aren't your first and second time home buyers. They're like your third and fourth time home buyers that are going to come out here in the summer, 13 weekends out of the year if the sun is out, and they're going to spend a lot of money in the community. And they're not going to put kids in the school district. They're going to pay taxes, and that's what we want. We want them to come down here and spend the money in the community. As a business owner, yes, that's what I would like to see.
Ray, what's your take on that project? That seems like the kind of project that starts to address some of the issues you're talking about. It doesn't put kids in the school, it increases the...
You brought this up because I was thinking about this. Back in the late 70s, New York City wanted Jamaica to be the shopping hub for the Queens. And they spent a lot of money over there, and it just didn't work out. And people ended up going to Flushing, and then, of course, over in Middle Village, they built the Queens Center, and that became really the hub for Queens. And I'm wondering if down by the canal doesn't become the hub for Hampton Bays. I mean, you're going to have this wonderful, all these, the boathouse done, you're going to have community, you're going to have the new catering hall. There's other restaurants, there's the Canal Cafe, there's Cowfish and Rumba. And I'm wondering if that's going to attract more people, and that might end up being more of a hub in Hampton Bays than the downtown area. I mean, only time will tell, but I just want to, because I don't want to come over too negative, I mean, Hampton Bays is the best corner. That's a planner's term. We have the best access to the ocean. We have the inlet. We have the bays. We really have it. We do have, I always say this, we have the train station stops in town. So I don't want to be too negative. I just, again, it's all about execution. Like, we have these assets, and we have to plan appropriately and develop them appropriately and maintain them. I mean, for example, one of the things was about bike paths down to the beach and whatnot. Well, we were at the civic meeting, and people were complaining that the bike paths are not maintained. There's debris in them. They're not paved. I don't know if that's Mr. Gregor's territory. So this we have to be, we have to stay alert and maintain this stuff and do the right things to entice people to come out here. And I do think we have a wonderful community. I mean, we have a wonderful geographical location, and all we have to do is run it right. Thank you.
Joe, look, to wrap it up, is there a village or a small town that might provide something like a blueprint for what Hampton Bays might be?
Probably not a single small town. I mean, Hampton Bays is unique. It's, you know, salt of the earth. It's got literally everything from, you know, commercial fishing to surf casting to walking on miles of pristine beaches, great trails, and literally, it's hard to find a community that has all the attributes that Hampton Bays has. Lots of open space, you know, from Red Creek area to all the Pine Barrens north of here. Such, you know, so it's kind of the perfect setting. There are examples in other areas. You could look at downtowns like Greenport or Sag Harbor and say, why are they vibrant? How have they been able to reinvent themselves to, you know, fight against some of those forces, the Amazons of the world, et cetera? And a lot of it comes down to having the population, so maybe the apartments up above the stores, so you have the foot traffic, but also the wet uses. So most of those places you'll find do have sewer systems to handle the waste so that you can have your ice cream stores and your restaurants and cafes. Without that, the health department's not going to let you put those uses in. Downtowns are becoming social centers where people interact. It's entertainment. You walk around, you go into some of these boutique stores, you go and, you know, you go into coffee shops. Maybe there's live music in a bar or a restaurant or something like that. So, you know, I look to some of those other places, but I do think Hampton Bays is distinct. It has its own character. It has its own flavor. It's hard to say it should be like this community or that community. I think it's going to be uniquely Hampton Bays. It's going to have its own Hampton Bays vibe. I've traveled a lot in the world. I've seen a lot of European cities. that do have those alleys, that do have, I love the fact that Main Street in Hampton Bays isn't just a straight level street. It actually goes up and it turns, so there's an incline. So the walking experience, as we see those facades improve, is really going to be a wonderful experience walking around downtown Hampton Bays. And it has, everything is there. It's like a diamond in the rough a little bit. But, I think the town is taking the steps to at least not get in the way, so that people can invest in these properties. People want to invest in their properties. But, if we start to identify some of the reasons why people haven't invested in their properties, and by the way, we did create a grant program for Hampton Bays. We're now offering $30,000 grants to businesses on Main Street to add landscaping or to add awnings to beautify their facades. But if the town can help facilitate it, I think the future of downtown Hampton Bays, and Hampton Bays in general, is extremely bright. A reporter the other day asked me, why do I smile when I talk about Hampton Bays? It's because I see all those positive things. Sometimes people will complain about this, that, or the other, but overall, I think this is an amazing community. It's a tight-knit community that has every amenity you can dream of. So, put it all together, and the future can only be positive.
I smile when I talk about Hampton Bays, too. It's my hometown, and it's because I appreciate everybody who came out today. This energy in the room is one of the reasons I think it's such a special place. So I want to thank you all for coming in. I want to thank our friends at CTV for recording and broadcasting this, our friends at One North Steakhouse for hosting us here, and I hope you'll join me to thank all 6 members of our panel who I think participated in a great conversation. As Gavin said to kick things off, this was our 11th press session. It will not be our last one in Hampton Bays, I can guarantee you. We have a lot more coming up this spring. They will appear on LTV and CTV as appropriate. So thank you again for coming. We hope you'll come next time, too. We have a conversation like this. Thank you very much.